A real home is never just four walls and a door.
It was a small house, really just south of downtown Indianapolis.
Now this place is big enough for 4 people.
It's a safe haven.
I got the essentials.
Sarah just wanted a life with a picket fence and a couple dogs.
Hey, watch it. You're not talking about my family that way. I'll say what I want.
But sometimes, the very people we trust most...
They started arguing, and it wasn't a good scenario.
...can turn a refuge into a grave.
He wasn't a bad person. He just was at the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people.
There were blood stains and other indications that somebody had been shot or hurt bad.
When death comes knocking, no one is safe. October 25th, 2000. Just another ordinary day in Indianapolis. And there's nothing unusual happening as John Thomas ends his shift.
Hey, Rummy, get out of there. I said get out. I don't have all day.
In a heartbeat, the day becomes anything but ordinary.
He thought it was maybe a bum that was in there, but then he realized he wasn't moving.
I think I saw a body. I think there was blood.
All right, you did fine. Well, let's see what we got here. That's brutal. You get severe damage to the body.
Then, police make another shocking discovery.
They found the first body and didn't know there was a second body until they moved the first one.
There's a worker here found 2 bodies in the dumpster.
2 bodies in a tangle of blood and hair. 2 bodies with terrible gunshot trauma.
A man and a woman.
They were able to, tell that they were not dead long.
There was not much blood at the scene, indicating that they'd been shot elsewhere. They'd been blown apart by a 12-gauge shotgun with deer slugs.
While the male victim has been shot once in the chest, the female victim appears to have met a more brutal end.
She was shot not just once, but twice. Shot in the chest, and then shot right in the side of the face, and her head was so disfigured that it was hardly recognizable.
This was not birdshot. So it didn't take a lot of shots to kill these 2.
There was nothing that they found that would identify who those people were.
They took the fingerprints, and they weren't in the Indiana database. So they took photographs of tattoos, distinctive tattoos. They were like a Grateful Dead-looking tattoo, and they were fresh. That's why it stuck out.
And they showed the tattoos on the television news.
Okay.
Calls flood police headquarters, and soon investigators are armed with a handful of leads.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Someone who recognized them called in, and she directed them to the house where they lived.
They got very solid leads right away that led them to the house, the murder house. This is a little house really just south of downtown Indianapolis. It was in a neighborhood that would be pretty distressed, a pretty lower income neighborhood.
This is police, open up.
When police arrive at the South Michael Street house, there's no one there. So they turn to the few people who live nearby.
So what exactly did you see?
They get some interesting information from a neighbor.
An older guy that got up in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning on October the 25th. He saw 2 larger people. He didn't know whether male or female, but they were putting something in the back of a pickup truck right there by the house.
This man wasn't in close proximity to the house. He couldn't see very well.
Detectives get a search warrant for the Michael house.
The warrant was, of course, obtained quickly because this is a brutal murder, and any judge is going to sign that warrant.
They went inside the home and discovered that the place was a mess.
Now, why would you put a sofa in the middle of the living room?
There was still evidence that something had happened in there. There were blood stains and other indications that somebody had been shot or hurt bad. Well, there'd been an attempt to clean it up, but it was pretty apparent that there was blood stain there. And I guess that's the reason why they moved the couch over on top of it.
Martinez here. Oh, yeah, thanks for getting back to me. Who are your tenants here? Sarah Pender is the one on the actual lease. Have you seen any of them in the last few days? Well, if you do, give us a call back at this number, night or day.
Who is Sarah Jo Pender? Could she be the female victim in the dumpster? Investigators waste no time digging into her past. Growing up in small-town Indiana, Sarah Jo Pender was just an average Hoosier girl.
She came from a broken home.
It was something that impacted her as she moved through her life, but she was on the surface, a happy kid. She had a sister, and they lived with her father. The father remarried. Sarah was a good-natured kid. She liked to shock people. She had a mischievous sense of humor. People would say that underneath, though, that she was a little bit troubled. She'd always been troubled by that divorce, and that she struggled a little bit to adjust.
She was such a fun sister, but she was different than I was in the perspective of that she was more book smart and more school focused.
When Sarah graduates from high school, her exceptional grades propel her to a competitive university.
She went to Purdue University. I thought she needed a year off before she went into college, but her dad was like, no, let's do it now.
So badly.
Sarah just wasn't ready for college and realized it pretty quickly. She became kind of a party girl. All the things that, college kids do.
I'm good.
So, what's your name?
Sarah.
After just a year, Sarah drops out of Purdue.
I think it was overwhelming, and so she quit.
She gets a job at a construction company.
They had seen the potential that she had. She wanted to go further and go into drafting.
When Sarah's not working hard, she's having a good time, or trying to. Just 4 months after she gets her job, Sarah's life takes a dark turn.
Sarah did not like to drink and drive, and they had had a few drinks. Her friend left, and she didn't realize it.
Are you okay?
And this guy says, well, you can stay here.
You're so hot.
And he proceeded to rape her. I asked who he was, where he lived, and she wouldn't tell me because I was going to press charges and do whatever I could.
No police report was ever made involving the incident or alleged incident.
I knew exactly why she didn't go to prosecute, because being a female, you have to go in front of the judge and jury, and you feel guilty for a crime that you didn't do.
It's a decision Sarah will come to regret.
Stop calling me.
Reality sets in that we don't have control sometimes of our life.
She was starting to fear for herself, for her life.
After dropping out of college and surviving a sexual assault, Sarah Pender is trying to move on with her life.
She was just a young girl, young woman at the time, and, seemed to be just looking for someone.
That's a good one.
That's one more of a laugh.
Well, that makes sense. They call me Bear.
Do they?
And a few months later, that someone comes into her life. 22-year-old Richard Hull.
So does the bear have a name? Smokey? Paddington?
I wish.
Yeah.
But it's Richard. Rick.
I'm Sarah.
Everybody loved Richard Hall. He was a friendly guy. He was truly actually a gentleman, as a matter of fact. I think in his heart he's had a very tough life. Dad left at an early age, raised by mom and grandmom. Just kind of a rough life, but everybody liked him. He was the gentle giant.
Well, cheers.
Cheers.
There was this big man with just this awesome personality.
Strong. Yeah.
And she always wanted to find someone to love her and to care about her.
When I spoke to Sarah about Rick, she's like, oh, he's got a laugh that just would make you You chuckle just by laughing, and he looks like he would be, mean at times, but he's really just a big, soft teddy bear.
Before long, they move in together.
Hey, hon.
I like having you here. I feel safe. Maybe you can move in.
We'll take a look around. It looks like I already have.
It happened very quickly, and she'd only known him for a couple weeks.
They didn't have a whole lot of time to develop this relationship.
So, what does the bear want for breakfast? Deer? Rodents? Bacon and eggs?
Yeah. Hello? Andrew, what's up? But where are you staying? It's my buddy Drew.
Andrew Cataldi and Rick Hull had met sometime before. They befriended each other.
We just need to really help us out. We're just looking for a place to land on our feet for a little bit.
He was pretty easygoing. He had a really good personality. He used to write to my mother a lot and just tell her things were going well. He didn't need any money right now, and he just explained that Richard helped him. He was good friends with him.
Andrew and his girlfriend just got in.
Andrew, who goes by Drew, is back in town, and he and his girlfriend Tricia need a place to stay.
Can they stay here for a while?
Well, I mean, it's not a mansion, but yeah, for a bed.
Okay, it's cool. She said yes.
They moved into the apartment together.
Thanks so much.
And it was crowded, so that they had gotten a house together.
Now this place is big enough for 4 people.
Okay, I got the essentials. Time to toast.
Andrew, Tricia, Rick, Sarah. They all moved into a house just to the south of the pro football stadium in Indianapolis. The neighborhood was sketchy, but it was a house, it was cheap.
You want to go check out upstairs?
It's not much, but it's home.
Excuse us.
And Sarah has big dreams for her future with Rick.
Sarah just wanted a life with a picket fence and a couple dogs. The house was in her name, the utilities was in her name, everything basically was hers.
Hello? Stop calling me!
What was that all about?
Rick, it's that guy that I told you about, okay? He won't stop calling me. I don't know what to do.
It's okay. I'll take care of it. Leave it to me.
It's also a place where she and her new boyfriend can host family and friends.
Hi, anyone? Oh, you're such a doll. Mom, this is Bear.
Nice to meet you, ma'am.
I'm not your teacher. Call me Bonnie.
Bonnie it is. And thanks for making this one.
I got to meet him, and he treated Sarah very, very nicely.
Guys, say hi to my mom. She made pie. Hey, Sarah's mom.
The 2 times that I had been to the house, Drew and Trish were sitting on a love seat.
Let's go into the kitchen.
I never saw Drew's face. He would not turn around and acknowledge that we were even in the room. I wasn't real happy. I didn't get good vibes.
As far as I know, the other people in the house and the 2 roommates, they were self-employed. You know, what, like, how are they paying you rent? And she said, well, they have a side business.
Sarah Pender had a legitimate job. She was the only one in the group that did.
People were worried about it. Sarah's mom would come by and say, how come you're the only one in this house working? And onlookers found it odd that she was the only one that got up in the morning and went to work. And she did. She was a good worker, too.
She'd love for Rick to share her work ethic.
You know, just because you're up doesn't mean I have to be.
Like, you should really look into that bouncing job that I found for you in the newspaper.
I'll give them a call.
You know, the conflicts in the house was more of, hey, you need to get a job, you need to get your stuff together.
You know, if we were both making regular income, we could start making plans for the future.
Okay, but Drew has some other ideas to make some money.
He started bouncing, and she was happy with that because at least he's gainfully employed and there's potential for more work. Maybe he could pick up a side job.
But his side job is not what she has in mind.
At the beginning, it was marijuana. Rick was using the bouncing job and was selling drugs. And that was a big no-no with Sarah.
What's going on here? I told you guys I don't want this in my house!
Sarah, it's nothing.
Rick Rick doesn't see it her way, and he has the rap sheet to prove it.
It's not a first date question. Hey, are you a felon?
They were primarily theft-related offenses and drug-related offenses. No crimes of violence.
He wasn't going to work in a factory or a restaurant. He was a drug dealer.
They were going to have a drug operation running out of that house they were living in.
So sick of this small-time stuff, dude. Well, what do you mean? I think we can think bigger. I know a guy who could set us up.
Did you talk to him? I think we should totally do it.
Look, just be discreet about it. I don't need Sarah knowing all about our business. She wants me to keep the bouncing job at the bar.
But before long, tensions arise.
Dude, this isn't a credit agency. Look, I don't care who she is, even if she's one of your people. Hey, watch it. Do not talk about my family that way. I'll say what I want.
Richard and Andrew and Trisha got into a disagreement about money.
There are some lines that you do not cross, I swear to God.
Okay, guys, seriously? I am so sick of this arguing, okay? I'm so sick of this!
Dude, you're being so stuck up.
Forget about it. I'm gonna go for a drive, and when I get back, this has got to be over.
Sarah and Cataldi did not get along, and she wanted both Trish and Cataldi out of the house.
These guys are really getting on my nerves. I want them out of here.
Well, I don't know. They're my partners.
No, listen. I'm your partner, okay? And I want them gone.
Whatever. Let's get out of here, okay?
After only weeks of living on Michael Street, Rick and Sarah began to avoid their own home. Later that night, 2 of the 4 roommates will be dead, and 2 on the run.
Police figured out they knew who they were looking for.
They know they've got to find these people.
Hey, watch it. Do not talk about my family that way. Say what I want.
After a fierce argument between roommates, 2 bodies are found in an Indianapolis dumpster the night of October 25th. The police investigation leads them to a deserted house on Michael Street. 2 couples, 2 corpses. But which couple now lies dead in the morgue?
Well, no one has seen her since the 25th. Okay, you call us if you do.
The police found out that Sarah had been to work on October 25th, but she didn't show up to work on the 26th.
Meaning Sarah is not the female body in the morgue. That same day, the coroner confirms the identities of the deceased.
The bodies have been positively ID'd. It's Andrew Cataldi and Trisha Norman.
Making their number 1 suspects, Rick Hull and Sarah Pender.
They had an idea already because they had known who lived there, and they knew. They were pretty sure of. They know they've got to find these people. It's more important, of paramount importance, to get the killers, or the alleged killers.
The chase is on, and it doesn't last long.
Found out that Rick was from Noblesville, and his mother lived up there.
So they started watching until finally Richard and Sarah showed up there, and police arrested them. I don't think that they put up much of a fight. I think they went along
Really quick. Within 24 hours, they were apprehended.
Sarah is quick to tell her story.
So, want to tell me what happened to your roommates? Other than us finding them dead in a dumpster yesterday?
We went for dinner with my dad and my stepmom, and then when we came home...
Hey, that's all you got? Hey, I need my money. Money! I just got even more. All you want is money. I don't know why you're blaming me when it's your boyfriend who's the one who's screwing me over. Screwing you over?
Hey, guys, seriously, I'm so sick of this, okay? Just figure it out. I'm gonna go get some milk.
Okay, well, I'm screwing you.
Sarah Pender said that she left the house because she didn't want to be around while they were arguing.
And she came back to the house, and the front door was locked. So she went around to the back door and went in, and that's when she had seen Trisha. She said, like, his face was just completely changed, from charismatic to very serious.
Sarah tells police that Rick said, "You gotta help me get rid of these bodies now."
So Sarah gets in the truck.
She then went along with Rick, helped him with the bodies. They dropped the bodies off.
So if you had nothing to do with the killings, why did you help? Why not just go straight to police?
Because I didn't want to end up in a dumpster like Drew and Trisha.
So where did you end up?
We ended up at a motel, and Rick told me to go into work the next day and that he'd buy a steam cleaner and he'd clean everything up.
As Sarah bares her soul, a reluctant Rick stews in the interrogation room next door.
So Sarah's gone for a walk. And what happens?
Nothing.
Really?
Well, initially he denies doing anything.
Drew just flipped out on me. I didn't know what was happening.
Then he gets to the point where he acknowledges a disagreement with Cataldi.
I don't lie! You're holding back this. Just give me the money. Calm down. Screw that. I'm calm down.
Richard claimed that he and Andrew were arguing.
And there was this conflict over this debt, this marijuana debt.
Give me that.
Give me my money, or you and your whole family are gonna die.
Rick say Andrew threatened his family.
Look, what did you want me to do?
Okay, so you're saying it was self-defense?
He said he felt if he didn't kill him, he was going to be killed.
But if it was self-defense, another question remains.
How did Trisha's face get blown off?
I think I need to make a phone call.
But then he lawyered up.
I thought you might say that.
Rick is charged with the murders of both Drew Cataldi and Tricia Nordman. Sarah is released.
They thought that Sarah had very little to do with this. She was another victim and was only doing what she had to do.
The case looks open and shut, but as police are collecting evidence, they get a surprise.
They went to the Walmart where the shotgun had been purchased and talked to a clerk there who identified, who had the paperwork that had been completed to purchase the shotgun with Sarah's name on it, and identified Sarah as well as the person that purchased it. And Rick Cole as the person that was with her. Well, she bought a shotgun. It was pretty apparent she had been forthcoming with him about all the facts in the case.
So what they did was they called her back and said, listen, we got some items we need you to come there and pick up.
Is this Sarah?
She says a couple stories about this gun. Sarah says, well, I bought it for a birthday gift for Rick.
You guys have it all wrong, okay? That gun was for protection.
You bought a shotgun on the day that your roommates were murdered with it.
She says as well she got the shotgun because she'd been sexually assaulted in the past.
There was this guy that had raped me, and he kept bothering me, and Rick just wanted to keep me safe. Stop calling me.
The guy who raped her had been leaving messages.
Stop calling me.
Saying that I will find you and I will do it again.
Rick, it's that guy that I told you about, okay? He won't stop calling me.
So that was his reasoning for her to buy a shotgun, because he was a felon, so he wasn't able to get a gun.
With no charges ever filed against the alleged rapist, investigators are dubious.
You have the right to remain silent.
She was charged then with murder and assisting a criminal. In Indiana, the law doesn't require the prosecution to prove in a murder case that the person on trial actually pulled the trigger, only that they assisted somehow in the commission of the crime, and then they're just as guilty as the person that actually committed the murders.
With both lovers facing murder charges, the case is about to take another dramatic turn.
While they're locked up, they're communicating through letters.
That's not normal. There's something wrong with that picture.
Sarah Pender and Richard Hull are both charged with the murders of their roommates, Drew Cataldi and Tricia Nordman. The co-defendants are forbidden to communicate, but Sarah finds someone to mail her love letters to Rick. During a routine check, jail officials find dozens of letters.
The information was mostly X-rated stuff, but in those letters, there was an indication that they were colluding with one another, supporting one another, to make certain that things turned out okay in their case.
But 7 months into their incarceration, Rick's defense counsel produces a letter that will change everything.
Well, Sarah Pender apologized in the letter to Rick for putting him through what she had. Said she must have been high on acid and that she had lost it and killed their two roommates.
Sarah? What did you do?
It's a shocking turn of events, and soon after, Rick changes his tune. He now claims that he was the one who had gone to the store and came back to discover the bodies.
He goes, what'd you do, Sarah? What's wrong? And she couldn't even talk, and then he noticed the two deceased.
The state's crime lab evaluates the letter and determines that even though the only fingerprints on the letter are Rick's, it's a match to Sarah's handwriting.
Not only the crime lab initial expert made the comparisons, but another handwriting expert, and agreed, again, 100%.
So what has she told you already? Nothing about the murder yet. She will.
Prosecutors are still reeling from this new information when another inmate brings forward more damning evidence against Sarah.
This man indicates that he can get close to Sarah Pender and perhaps find out from her what her involvement was in the murders, although she had not admitted anything up to him at that point.
Homicide detectives make a plan to get the jailbirds together alone to see if Sarah will sing.
This fella, through the assistance of homicide detective, makes arrangements then to meet Sarah Pender out at the hospital in the detention unit.
Fancy meeting you here.
Nice to talk to someone who's not a cop or a screw.
Tell me about it. I've been dying for real conversation.
Me too.
They were shackled to beds, 15, 20 feet apart, but were able to at least communicate with one another. No one was present, I guess, during some of the conversations that took place. Sarah admitted to him that she had planned the murders of the two roommates and gotten Rick Hull to shoot them, to murder them.
He said that Sarah had pulled the strings.
Even though this contradicts the confession letter, it speaks to motive, and both are used at Sarah's trial.
I argued to the jury that there was evidence as to more than one way the crime occurred. One, that Richard Hull committed the crimes, and she induced it, even encouraged him to do it. Or that, two, she herself shot the two roommates and killed them. Either way, she's guilty of murder.
The evidence that helped convict Sarah Pender, there were really three things: the receipt for the shotgun, this letter, and the testimony of that jailhouse snitch. Larry called her the female Charles Manson, and that stuck. Sarah Pender became the female Charles Manson. He was convinced that while Richard Hull pulled the trigger, she had pulled the strings.
The jury agrees. On August 22, 2002, Sarah Jo Pender is found guilty of 2 counts of murder.
So Sarah pled not guilty and maintained her innocence through the trial, even crying very hard as she was led away.
The judge gave her a sentence of 55 years on each of the murders because Sarah Pender had been the moving force, had planned it, manipulated Richard Hull.
I don't know, they're my partners.
No, listen, I'm your partner, okay? And I want them out.
And that she was with Richard Hull every step of the way.
I was devastated because there was no way that the state had enough evidence to prosecute her on murder, let alone 2 counts of murder. And then to give her 110 years, my God. I couldn't believe that the law had failed my sister.
I cried a lot. I was just dumbfounded when it came back that she had to serve 110 years.
When Rick Hull pled guilty, it was his position that he helped Sarah Pender commit the murders, that she actually committed them. He said he was taking responsibility for his involvement in the murders, even though he didn't shoot the 2 people.
Rick Hull is sentenced to 75 years for 2 counts of murder. It appears that justice has finally been served. But nothing about this case is as it seems. In 2005, 3 years after the sentencing, Rick makes a surprising claim.
That letter was a fake. Do you understand? The one where it says she killed Drew and Trisha.
Rick stated that the confession letter that he provided was a fraud.
And signs an affidavit to that effect.
The affidavit indicated that Richard Hull had killed the 2 roommates and that Sarah Pender didn't have anything to do with it, that her involvement was just afterwards. She was scared and helped him.
Go get some blankets!
She didn't actually have any involvement in the murders. He thought he was already sentenced, so he didn't have to worry about any repercussions for him after that, and he just came to save his love of his life.
In light of this new information, Sarah's legal team requests that the court reconsider the case.
So you mean I can get out of here? Okay, let's start the paperwork then, okay?
But the request is denied.
What? Are you serious? There's no other way.
The courts have decided that this new evidence doesn't rise to a level that they believe is enough to give her a new trial.
Having exhausted her legal avenues, a desperate Sarah puts another plan into action.
She's been telling people, I'm going to get out of here.
The world has not seen the last of Sarah Jo Pender.
It started with seducing one of the guards there.
Then I thought, well, maybe Larry had something. Maybe this woman is a female Charles Manson.
It's August 4th, 2008, and Sarah Pender has been sitting in Rockville Correctional Facility for 6 years. Despite new evidence,
That letter was a fake.
she now faces her 110-year sentence, or does she?
She had begun making plans for this escape. She figured out a way she could do it, and it started with seducing one of the guards there. She exploited that with great expertise, and she, with the help of the guard and a change of clothes, she snuck out of the prison in the back of a van driven by this compromised guard. And in the prison parking lot, she got into a waiting car and drove off.
When she got this guard to leave his wife and help her escape from prison, then I thought maybe this woman is a female Charles Manson. She certainly did show those skills in getting out of prison.
Now on the lam, Sarah changes her appearance and adopts the name Ashley Thompson.
Hello, Ashley.
But that doesn't keep law enforcement off her scent.
The U.S. Marshals made her a top 15 wanted fugitive. I think she was the first female. Then it got a lot of more attention.
As the nationwide hunt for Sarah garners international attention, writer Steve Miller digs into her case for a book, enlisting the aid of the man who sent her to prison.
Well, Steve Miller and I went to the Indianapolis Police Department, and we were looking through the homicide files, and we came across the file of the snitch. I'd already thought I'd seen everything that was in that file. And then Steve pulls out this folded up pieces of yellow legal pad and opens it up.
It was handwritten. It was just a handwritten piece of paper. It's 2 pages. And I looked, and I said, this is interesting. And I look at it. Larry's like, what are you looking at? And I handed it to him. I said, this looks like a list of people that the snitch was willing to turn evidence on.
Oh. And I looked at it, and I said, oh, I've never seen that before. I didn't have it. The defense didn't have it. They should have had it for the trial.
On the paper is a huge list of all the people the inmate was willing to sell out for a lighter sentence.
He was throwing everybody under the bus.
If I'd known that, I would have never called him as a witness, because he would have been useless to me. I wouldn't have believed anything he said at that point.
You cast anything he said into doubt, because he was willing to turn on anyone.
I know nothing about the murder yet, but you will.
Was it credible or not? He was just willing to do whatever it took. That means he's also willing to say anything.
But with her appeals exhausted, the snitch list can't help Sarah. As the list fades into memory, Sarah continues to spin a new web, this time in Chicago.
This story was that she was hiding from an abusive ex-husband.
A few months later, her past finally catches up to her when Chicago police get a fateful phone call.
She was on America's Most Wanted several times, and on that night that she was caught, America's Most Wanted aired an episode and put a picture on there and said she's been out since August.
It was a neighbor in Chicago who called the Chicago Police Department one night and said, hey, I think my neighbor, something suspicious, you know, she never comes out.
Come in.
She was smoking marijuana when she answered the door, so her guards were really down. The 2 police officers asked who she was, and she identified herself. I'm her. I'm Sarah Pender.
You call me.
And so she offered no resistance.
Good for you.
Sarah Jo Pender is sent straight back to prison.
Anyone who escapes is deemed high risk because you got out once. They sure don't want you to get out again. So Sarah was put in solitary for 5 years because of the escape.
As Sarah sits in solitary, a nagging voice prompts former prosecutor Sells to speak up, despite his conviction that Sarah is guilty.
Steve Miller's book came out, Girl Wanted, The Chase for Sarah Pender. I read that book and came across that passage in the book that referred to that same incident in the homicide room where I saw that snitch list. I said, oh, hell, Larry, you got to do something about this. So I eventually contacted Sarah Pender's mother, Bonnie Prosser.
Hello?
I said, Bonnie, hear me out.
And he told me of the 72 murder cases that he had done, one was a mistake, and it was theirs.
I said, I don't think Sarah got a fair trial. And I'll do what I can to help assure that she does get a fair trial.
To date, the state refuses to reopen the case.
When they convict somebody in Indiana, they don't like to turn it around.
We got the bad end of the deal. I have a sign in my truck says Free Sarah Pender, and I have had people stop me at stoplights and say, I know your daughter. I read that story. I pray for you. And yet I can't find anybody that wants to help me and help her. But I will help her until the day I die.
Still, many, including Andrew Cataldi's sister, remain convinced of Sarah's guilt.
I don't know how I would feel or what I'd go through to know if they released her. As far as I'm concerned, neither one of them should ever come out of there, and I wish she would just admit to herself what she did, and, you know, so I do feel justice has been served, getting 110 years in there, and I don't ever want to see them, and I honestly will never forgive them. I don't have it in my heart. They destroyed my family, so I will never forgive them for that.